think is on her way in. All right. Ms. Duncan.
Thank you all for joining us tonight and answering questions. My first question is for Mr. Buckley. Have you ever taken a deposition that's sworn testimony for our audience outside the presence of the judge, but it's just like you're testifying in open court? Second part is, what is the extent of your experience practicing civil cases?
Well, my entire career has been working for the courts. I've worked in the circuit, mainly in the circuit court and in the Court of Appeals as a staff attorney. I have not represented individual clients, so I have no experience taking a deposition. However, I do have experience reviewing depositions, and I know all the issues that come up in depositions, particularly the issues that are going to come before the court, and that is the admissibility of evidence and objections to specific questions in depositions.
Do you feel like the fact that you've not personally represented litigants, plaintiff or defendant as a prosecutor or a private criminal defense attorney, do you feel like that would hinder you in stepping up and filling the shoes of our retiring judges who obviously have been on the bench for a number of years and have a wealth of knowledge that some of us feel will be lost when they step down?
Well, we are losing some very good judges, but we also need a diversity of experience on the bench. Not all attorneys are trial practitioners. And I've come from a perspective that doesn't represent one side or the other. My job has been to give my best and most objective advice to the judges who I work for. So I don't see this as necessarily a hindrance, but as a different perspective.
Do you think you'd have any issues calling, so to speak, the balls and strikes since you've never been in that position before? You've advised the judge, but you haven't been in the arena fighting, so to speak.
Again, I don't see I'd have a problem with that because I do understand where all the issues are. And in many of these cases, you simply have to know the law well enough to call these evidentiary issues, to rule on objections and know what the parties are talking about, and to recognize the issues that come before you.
Thank you, Mr. Buckley. Mr. Lewis, the next question is for you. Have you ever tried a civil case? If so, please let us know what types of civil cases you have tried and how many.
I want to make sure everyone can hear me. My video doesn't appear to be working.
I can hear you.
Everything's good. Go.
Okay, apologize. So I was born in civil law at legal aid, actually, when I was an intern and had a practicing license there for 2 years before I graduated law school, and then I went to legal aid to finish out what would have been a total of 5 years entirely in civil practice. My first civil trial was probably in family court when I was still a student, and I would have been supervised by a supervising attorney. After that, when I was admitted to the bar, I started trying numerous 6-person juries in district court representing the indigent, of course. So those would have been lawsuits for small amounts of money, like from landlords, or where we sued landlords for conditions in their property, or it was an eviction case. And I've never counted those, but there were probably in the neighborhood of 20 to 30. And then after that, I was a criminal prosecutor for 15 years. So then founded my own practice for the last 10. Of those 10 years, I think all of my civil trials have been in front of the bench because they usually involve things like equitable relief, where I'm representing an individual who is appealing a governmental decision, or we're suing the governmental agency, for example, or we're applying municipal law. Most of the issues don't involve jury claims. So I think that summarizes my civil experience pretty well.
Thank you, Mr. Lewis. The next question is for Ms. Clay. What do you perceive as the greatest obstacles to justice, if any?
Oh gosh, that's a big question. I think
the greatest obstacles currently are financial. I think access to the courts. I think a lot of our citizens lack the ability to hire attorneys in cases where they don't necessarily get appointed counsel, or they lack the resources to pay for necessary things in cases. Obviously, bond, our cash bail system is, I don't think it's working, but lack of resources, lack of ability to pay bond, which creates, collateral effects in terms of how cases progress, whether or not plea deals are made, whether or not people exercise their right to go to trial. I would say financial capabilities.
Sure. I'm shifting gears just a little bit. Are there any changes that you would make to circuit court based on your experience practicing there?
There are most changes that I think need to be made are more in the criminal realm. I think in civil cases, I think forced mediations tend to be useless. I think unless the parties agree that they need mediation and it's closer to trial, I don't know that it's very helpful. It seems to be usually just a waste of time. But I think it's kind of a way to get, cases out of the court. I think in criminal cases, I think utilizing more alternatives to incarceration. We have so many tools available to us. Obviously, there are a lot of changes that can be made by the legislature, but we have tools currently judges do for example, surety bonds, issuing bail credit to defendants, utilizing our alternative courts or specialty courts. Changes I would like to make would be utilizing those more. I would like to expand our specialty courts. I would like to see more mental health courts, more drug courts, so that we have more opportunities for people to utilize those resources.
Time's up.
Thank you. Ms. Compton, first question for you. How many jury trials have you had? And do you think it is necessary for a person that is elected as judge to have trial experience?
So for jury trials, I've only had a handful. As far as bench trials, in my 16 years of practice, at one point, I was pretty much practicing or pretty much having trials every week in civil cases. And so those were mostly bench trials just because of the nature of the cases. Yes, I do think that it is important for judges to have as much experience as they can as far as trial experience. However, there's more that goes into being a judge than just presiding over a trial. And so I had the opportunity as an extern to sit in many trials and sit on the bench with judges to see different ways that different judges do things. However, just to be candid, we all have the same law degrees. We all had to pass the bar. And while we have varying levels of practice, we all do not share the same life experience. And for me, in my experience, as a citizen of Jefferson County, born and raised, and with as much family and clientele and friends that I have here, I know for a fact that it is very important that you have a well-rounded judge, not just with trial experience, not just with legal experience, but with life experience.
And based on that statement that you need a well-rounded judge, what else do you think the minimum criteria should be besides number of years practicing law degree, pass the bar?
You cannot rate common sense, but judges need common sense, and part of that comes from having life experience. You need a great judicial temperament, and I think above all, in seeing that I have 15 seconds, above all, you need someone who's a servant leader, who doesn't get on the bench and thinks that that chair or that spot is theirs.
Thank you. Thank you for trying to squeeze that in. Buckley, I'll go back to you. What improvements would you make to circuit court in terms of case management or discovery? Any ideas that you have?
In any circuit court position, the most important thing is to have have a judge who's on top of things and a staff who's on top of things. I have learned the importance of having a good bench clerk and a good administrative assistant who can make sure things are scheduled, who can make sure motions are properly presented, who can go through and do the 7702 motions, the motions to determine whether there's been any action on cases. I'd also take a personal effort in making sure that the docket is handled efficiently so as not to waste time of the people coming before the court.
Why should voters vote for you, Mr. Buckley?
As I said before, I'm coming to this from a unique perspective. I don't come from a particular prosecution or defense or plaintiff's counsel. My career has been to look objectively at cases and decide them fairly based upon the law. I am deeply committed to the rule of law and to fairness and respect for all people who come before the court. I'm also active in my community, and I believe that being a judge, I definitely believe that being a judge is a public service, and that as a judge, we are all answerable to the law and to the people.
Thank you. Mr. Lewis, I'll move to you next. What are the pros and cons of going on the bench as opposed to remaining in private practice? And I'll ask you the same question. Why should voters vote for you?
As far as the pros of going on the bench, I might have to ask some of you all to convince me of that. But I've enjoyed all 25 years of my practice, and I will continue to enjoy it if that's what the voters tell me to do. I don't think I was born to be a judge or I deserve it or anything like that. I was born a working class kid. I'm the first person in the extended family to have a degree from any college, certainly to enter the legal profession. Why should they vote for me? I think because we are restricted appropriately from announcing things like the way we would rule on issues and partisan affiliation and the like. It has to be based on the resume in the past. As the Bible teaches us, you'll know them by their fruits. And I feel that my background is sufficiently broad, both in civil law and criminal law, on both sides of those cases, that I bring the broadest perspective. And I also want to speak to the fact that one of my catchphrases is compassion and fairness. I make this part of my personal life. I live in the most racially diverse neighborhood in the city. I am endorsed by the councilman of that neighborhood, who's the president of council. I've been the president of that neighborhood association. I founded a nonprofit organization whose entire mission is to provide the restoration of voting rights and the expungement of old criminal records. And that's after being a prosecutor for 15 years. I believe very strongly in bringing my background and those perspectives to the bench in fairness. And I want to just throw in real quick that jury trials in the criminal system will expand under me significantly, as will the representation of all the diverse categories of folks in Louisville. There is a way to do that. I have been a champion of it.
Thank you, Mr. Lewis. Ms. Clay, the next question is for you. If you've been watching, I've been asking questions about civil experience, and that is because as a civil litigant, I know there is a concern that there's a loss of institutional knowledge with so many judges stepping down or not running for re-election. So the question is, what is your experience in terms of civil cases? How many have you handled? Have you tried a civil case? And of course, please let us know why voters should vote for you.
Well, so yes, I do. Most of my background is criminal defense. I obviously started out as a public defender, and I've been on my own for 6 years, doing mostly criminal defense. But I do have civil experience. I grew up in a family of all civil attorneys. I'm the only one who really kind of went a different path. But I enjoy civil law. I have tried 2 civil cases, but I was second chair on those. So I do want to clarify they were not my cases as first chair, and those being in circuit court. In terms of civil trials, I mean, if we're including, I've been a guardian ad litem in family court for 5 years, representing indigent parents and children. I've probably had 40 or 50 trials in there. I also was a guardianship attorney in district court. I was appointed to represent individuals who needed counsel. In guardianship trials, I probably had 15 of those. It is the same rules, obviously, in both of those courts, but I've had 2 civil trials in circuit court. I think that I'm the most qualified for Division 9, for judge in Division 9. I think experience matters, obviously. I think trial experience matters. I do think it's very important that our judges have trial experience. I think it's hard to preside over a case if you haven't been on the other side of it, understanding how it gets in front of you. But I think we need more public defenders on the bench. I have spent my entire career representing disadvantaged individuals in the community. I started as a public defender. I've continued to do conflict cases for the public defender's office. I've represented indigent families in family court, guardianship court, pro bono cases. I helped launch the first misdemeanor drug court here in Jefferson County. I've also worked extensively in mental health court here. I think having the right experience is just as important as having experience in general.
Thank you, Ms. Clay. Final question for Division 9 candidates goes to Ms. Compton. What injustices have you witnessed inside or outside of the courtroom, and what was your response to those events?
Too many to enumerate. I will say this, of the people that are, of those who are running for Division 9, I am the one who has ran more than once, so this is not my first rodeo. I think that makes me better. My mom would say stubborn, I say persistent. But I would say this, what have I done about it? The first thing I did about it was run in 2010. The opponent that I had in 2010, I was the youngest person on the ballot going against the most seasoned judge. I saw how that judge treated people in the courtroom. While she may have known the law and had been there for years and years and years, it wasn't right. Like I was going to say on my last question, we have to realize that judges are servants. They are paid by the city, the citizens of Jefferson County, and they are to serve the citizens of Jefferson County, which takes compassion and care, commitment to justice, and just humanity. That same judge years later ended up retiring early for putting a domestic violence victim in jail. So that was one of the first things I've done. Outside of that, I'm always doing free seminars and free workshops, taking pro bono cases, doing volunteer work with legal aid, as well as church organizations and nonprofits. So I'm all over the place as far as looking for ways that I can make Jefferson County better. The way that I'm trying right now, however, is to be on the bench in Division 9. We need diversity in education, diversity in experience. We need somebody who's going to be confident and care for the people and care for the process. We need someone who's going to be committed to service and committed to justice. As an attorney, I've been a judge for the people. As a judge, I want to be a judge for justice. I want to restore the faith of the citizens of Jefferson County in our legal system. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, everyone.
All right, that concludes the panel for Division 9. We will move on to Division 10. And while we are pinning the